Hello, you're watching Gravitas. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Let's get started. Tonight on Gravitas, we talk about China. The Chinese have broken their silence on Hormuz, calling Donald Trump's blockade as dangerous. We decode all that has been happening between America and China weeks ahead of the US president's visit to Beijing. And we also get you how Donald Trump's cardinal sin did not go down too well with his Catholic supporters. The president has now deleted this post and even insisted that now, not Jesus, in fact, he was a doctor in the AI-generated image. We're also telling you tonight about Japan's latest pledge to amend its war-renouncing constitution in an apparent preparation for a war-like situation which might involve Taiwan. We tell you all about it tonight. Tensions in West Asia have now brought two nuclear global superpowers face to face, one that completely changes the entire equation, militarily or diplomatically. China has openly challenged the US over the Strait of Hormuz blockade. In fact, two Chinese ships have defied the Hormuz blockade, which has triggered a major showdown between the two countries. This comes after China issued a blunt warning against any attempt to impose a naval blockade on Iran. China maintains that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open for global trade and Chinese energy supply lines. Beijing has made it clear that its economic cooperation with Iran will not be subject to outside interference, with Chinese officials stressing that stability of Hormuz is essential for global energy security.
At a time when the relevant parties have already reached a temporary ceasefire arrangement, the US escalation of military deployment and its targeted blockade action will only exacerbate contradictions, heighten tensions, undermine the already fragile ceasefire situation, and further jeopardize the safety of passage through the strait. This is dangerous and irresponsible behavior.
Now, Beijing continues to emphasize that safety, stability, and unimpeded passage from Hormuz are critical to international trade. Hormuz is a vital lifeline for the world's second largest economy, and the numbers explain why 40% of China's crude oil imports, along with 30% of its LNG imports, flow through the strait. But the confrontation between the two countries escalated from words to water. According to shipping tracker websites, two China-linked vessels moved through the strait despite the blockade that was imposed by the United States yesterday. Now, reports suggest that both of these ships have been sanctioned by United States. Reports also suggest that the US blockade of Hormuz may be aimed at preventing energy transactions in China's yuan, which challenges the petrodollar system and a major way to bypass the American sanctions. The U.S. Central CENTCOM claims more than 10,000 U.S. sailors, Marines, and airmen, along with over a dozen warships and dozens of aircraft, are executing the mission to blockade ships entering and departing Iranian ports. It says that no ships breached the blockade in the first 24 hours, with at least 6 merchant vessels turned back after complying with American directions. Now, the ripple effect is also being felt across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia and other regional powers are reportedly urging Washington to step back from escalation and return to diplomacy. They warn that a prolonged blockade standoff could trigger energy shocks and destabilize the region even further. America and China have not been on the same page over the ongoing conflict. Following the start of the hostilities in February, Beijing, remember, had condemned the Israel-US attack against Iran. Donald Trump has also threatened to slap an additional 50% tariff on Beijing if it supplies weapons to Tehran. Now, according to an intelligence assessment report, Beijing could be preparing shipments of air defense systems to Iran. China has dismissed such reports as groundless and malicious. All of this has been unfolding as Xi Jinping hosts Abu Dhabi Crown Prince Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in Beijing. During the meeting, Xi proposed a 4-point roadmap for peace in West Asia as well, and this is as per the Xinhua news agency. Now, the proposal calls for upholding peaceful existence, respecting national sovereignty, coordinating development and security, and safeguarding the international rule-based order. And that brings us to the bigger question. Beyond the strait itself, what does this mean for the upcoming Trump-Xi meeting? Donald Trump has said that he will visit China on the 14th and 15th of May. This will be a first direct trip by a U.S. president in nearly 10 years. Launching a blockade that directly threatened Chinese energy interests just 30 days before sitting down with Xi Jinping in Beijing might be a negotiating tactic that Trump wants to avoid. Meanwhile, international diplomatic efforts continue to calm things down in West Asia. Just a while back, Donald Trump called Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where the two leaders discussed bilateral ties and the situation in West Asia. In fact, taking to social media, PM Modi released a statement as well, saying, and I quote, "We reviewed the substantial progress achieved in our bilateral cooperation in various sectors. We are committed to further strengthening our comprehensive global strategic partnership in all areas." We also discussed the situation in West Asia and stressed on the importance of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and secure. Now remember, this is the third phone call between the two leaders this year and the second since the US and Israel launched their war against Iran. Pakistan has been under the lens for its West Asian diplomacy after hosting the US-Iran talks last weekend. Why is Islamabad so invested in this peace process? Well, the answer might lie in its Strategic Defense Mutual Agreement, or the SDMA, signed with Saudi Arabia last year. While specific details regarding this pact were not disclosed back then, the two countries pledged that any attack on either country would be treated as an act of aggression against both. Now, this has raised concerns over Pakistan getting embroiled in the West Asian war. This agreement again came into focus as a Pakistani military contingent comprising around 13,000 soldiers and 10 to 18 jets was deployed to Saudi Arabia's King Abdulaziz Air Base on the 11th of April. This was the same day on which Islamabad hosted talks between America and Iran. Now, media portal Dropsite News has released new details on this agreement, which gives a sense of how Pakistan is caught between a rock and a hard place. The military cooperation between the two nations goes back decades. As per this publication, this was first crystallized in a confidential agreement on the 14th of December back in 1982. A revised version of this pact, titled Military Cooperation Agreement, was signed on the 30th of July in 2005, when late military dictator Pervez Musharraf was in power. However, the scope of this agreement was rather limited in nature. The report revealed that it focused on developing and strengthening cooperation in areas such as training, defense production, transfer of technology, and purchase of military equipment. But most importantly, it did not entail defending each other militarily. According to this publication, Saudi Arabia sought to amend this pact in August of 2021, obligating Pakistan to send forces to its territory on its request to deal with any threat which affects its security, safety, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and interests. While the then Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan reportedly harbored apprehensions over this clause, he was ousted from power in a no-confidence motion in April of 2022. 2 years later, a caretaker government in Pakistan approved this amendment. As per Dropsite News, this SDMA signed in September of 2025, that's last year, is believed to be a further updated version of this agreement. Last year, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif's remarks on the scope of this agreement stirred a row. When asked whether Saudi Arabian troops will be deployed to Pakistan during a conflict with India, he'd said, and I quote him, "Yes, there is no doubt on this. We haven't taken a name of any nation, but if there is an aggression from any side, then it would be addressed jointly. It is not an aggressive defense pact." But Dropsite News stated that the military pact does not impose a reciprocal obligation on Riyadh to defend Pakistan. For instance, Saudi Arabia has not provided any material assistance to Pakistan in its recent war with Afghanistan. In fact, also important to note is that India and Saudi Arabia's defense ties are on the rise. They have a joint committee on defense cooperation as well as an MOU on intelligence sharing. Now, another aspect of the Saudi-Pakistan pact has evoked concerns. As per Dropsite News, Riyadh has reportedly not clearly distinguished between conventional and nuclear forces when it comes to Pakistan. Now, this raises questions whether this agreement extends to Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. Ambiguity also persists over the possibility of Pakistan having to partake in military action outside of Saudi Arabia. Pakistan's dilemma came to the fore during the initial days of the West Asia War. Speaking on the floor of the National Assembly in early March, Ishaq Dar had hinted that he had told the Iranians that Pakistan will have to militarily support Riyadh if it is attacked. This assumes significance as Pakistan and Iran share a 900-kilometer-long border, with Pakistan increasingly relying on Saudi Arabia for bailing it out financially. Obviously, its military pact becomes even more vital in these conflict-ridden times. Even as the deal is proving elusive, U.S. President Donald Trump has revealed that a second round of talks may happen within the next 2 days. However, with uranium enrichment emerging as the major sticking point, it is increasingly perceived that Russia holds the key to a deal. U.S. President Trump has said that the Islamabad talks broke down over Iran's refusal to give up its nuclear ambition. As per reports, while the U.S. asked Iran to suspend uranium enrichment for 20 years, Tehran has agreed to do so only for 5 years. It also reportedly rebuffed the U.S. request to remove its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Russian President Vladimir Putin has now stepped in with an offer that may be acceptable to both sides. He has expressed willingness to take in Iran's enriched uranium as part of a peace deal.
Предложение было озвучено президентом Путиным.
This proposal was voiced by President Vladimir Putin in contacts with both the United States and regional states. The offer still stands but has not been acted upon.
Но не было востребовано.
Now, why may America be inclined to accept this and bring a closure to this war? While it has implemented a blockade in a bid to pressure Iran, the global energy crisis is showing no signs of abating. The IMF has issued a stern warning as well. The Strait of Hormuz may never return to normal. According to the IMF, the present crisis could lead to a new reality, where the Strait of Hormuz loses most of its traffic and stops being a key waterway, similar to what happened with the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb. It has also warned of a global recession. In fact, another point of contention has been payment of compensation. While Iran has demanded the release of its frozen assets and is mulling a proposal to charge transit fee on ships that are passing through Hormuz, it has now put up a fresh demand. In a letter addressed to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Iran's permanent representative Amir Saeed Iravani sought reparations from Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, as well as Jordan. He accused them of committing internationally wrongful acts by allowing their territories to be used by America and Israel. As per the Iranian state media, the Masoud Pezeshkian-led government has pegged overall losses at about $270 billion. The letter also alleged that these countries also directly carried out attacks against civilians in Iran. Earlier, the UAE had demanded compensation from Iran for its damage that was caused to vital facilities. And now the Gulf nations, which Iran named, hosts American bases that reportedly played a key role during this war. For instance, Qatar is home to the Al Udeid Air Base, which is America's largest military installation in West Asia. Similarly, the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain's Manama is the central hub for the U.S. naval operations in the Gulf of Oman, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, and parts of the Indian Ocean. Now, incidentally, all of these bases were damaged in Iran's retaliatory action. The war in Iran has resulted in considerable damage. As per Iranian Red Crescent Society, over 125,000 civilian units, including 100,000 residential properties, have suffered damage. Around 339 medical facilities comprising hospitals, labs, and pharmacies were also hit in the Israeli-American strikes. Even educational institutions weren't spared. On the very first day of the war, 168 people, including school students and staff, were killed in an American missile strike on a girls' school in Minab. Overall, 857 schools and 32 universities were damaged in the attacks. Now, more than 140 historic sites across 20 provinces of Iran incurred damage as well from the strikes. This includes landmarks like Ahmad Riza Pahlavi Palace and the Farokhabad Palace. According to Iran's tourism minister, Riza Sarheyi Amiri, the preliminary losses are estimated at $49 million. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing mounting pressure on multiple fronts. And we're not talking about the war. Rather, Netanyahu finds himself facing criticism from a senior American leader, a setback from a key European ally, and a fresh controversy over his claims on the U.S.-Israel coordination. First, the former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has once again criticized the Israeli Prime Minister, calling Netanyahu a liability to Israel's long-term security. Speaking in an interview, Hillary Clinton underscored her support for Israel's right to exist and defend itself. But she drew a clear line between backing Israel and backing its current leadership. She reiterated that Netanyahu's approach has weakened Israel's international standing and undermined its broader security interests. Citing her own experience, Hillary Clinton said that Israel has long pushed for confrontation with Iran, claiming that Netanyahu has repeatedly urged American presidents to support an open-ended conflict. At the same time, Netanyahu is facing a diplomatic setback from Europe, as Italy has announced the suspension of the automatic renewal of a defense cooperation agreement with Israel.
There are things we do not agree with. We act accordingly. You didn't ask me this, but the government, for example, taking into account the current situation we are experiencing, has decided to suspend the automatic renewal of the defense agreement with Israel.
The move signals a shift from Italy's traditionally strong support for Israel. This decision follows criticism of Israeli military actions in Lebanon as well, which have affected Italian troops serving under a UN mandate. Italy claimed that IDF fired shots at an Italian convoy in a UN mission in Lebanon. Subsequently, Rome summoned the Israeli ambassador to Italy, demanding an explanation. As per reports, military training cooperation, joint exercises, exchange of military technology between the two countries could now come to a halt. And now Netanyahu's own remarks have sparked a fresh controversy. The Israeli Prime Minister claimed that the Trump administration has been sharing daily updates with Israel on negotiations with Iran.
I spoke with Vice President J.D. Vance. He called me from his plane on his way back from Islamabad. He briefed me in detail, as officials of this administration do on a daily basis, about the developments in the negotiations in this case, the collapse of the talks.
These statements have drawn criticism from American lawmakers and commentators, raising concerns about the nature of the U.S.-Israel engagement. Mark Boken, a Democratic congressman from Wisconsin, on social media pointed out that the Trump administration reports daily to Netanyahu on the Iran war, but not the U.S. Congress or the American people. So that's three developments, with one central figure, Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces growing pressure on multiple fronts. After weeks of escalation, a fragile ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran may have paused the missiles, but it has not silenced the questions. In the U.S., the war is now hitting where it hurts the most: average Americans' pockets, politics, and public trust. From rising fuel costs to a deepening political divide, Americans are now grappling with what this conflict really means for their future. Our next report gets you more details.
The aftershocks of the war with Iran are echoing across the United States. A conflict that lasted just weeks has left a lasting mark, not on the battlefield alone, but across the American economy and public mood. For many, the most immediate impact is economic. Rising fuel prices, supply chain disruptions, and market uncertainty are beginning to squeeze households and small businesses alike. The cost of living, already a pressure point, is now tied directly to a war thousands of miles away.
You start talking about fertilizer prices, we saw an increase of like our liquid nitrogen that we run went up, $100, $150 a ton.
Cash flow here is tight, and especially was tight last year at the end of this growing season. We just didn't have a good growing season, so we couldn't pre-buy a lot of those inputs. So yeah, we got hit at the worst possible time because we're trying to buy fertilizer when it skyrockets and when the supply also gets cut.
The war in Iran has fueled the biggest jump in US inflation in nearly 4 years and sent consumer sentiment tumbling to a record low. Economists say that's just the beginning.
The impact of the high car prices is a little bit different because we're not all buying a new car every year, usually. But it does mean that especially for lower income consumers, finding a good, reliable car has gotten much harder.
But this is not just an economic story, it is a political one. The war, launched without broad consensus, has exposed sharp divisions. Support and opposition are split along partisan lines, reflecting a country that is deeply polarized on foreign policy, leadership, and the use of force. For some, the war feels distant, a story confined to screens and headlines. For others, it is a source of real anxiety, especially as fears grow over a prolonged conflict or deeper military involvement. Concerns over global trade routes, energy security, and possible retaliation are adding to a sense of unease. The ceasefire may have lowered the temperature, but it has not removed the risk. The ceasefire may hold, or it may not. But one thing is clear, for many Americans, this war is no longer just about foreign policy. It is about their economy, their security, and their future. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
A day after launching a scathing attack on Pope Leo, the US President Donald Trump has refused to apologize for his comments on the pontiff. Speaking with reporters at the White House, Trump repeated his charge that Pope Leo is weak on crime and is against his policies on Iran.
No, I don't, because Pope Leo said things that are wrong. He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran, and you cannot have a nuclear Iran. Pope Leo would not be happy with the end result. You have hundreds of millions of people dead, and it's not going to happen, so I can't.
Now, Trump also defended an AI-generated image depicting him as a Jesus-like figure. The image was posted on his Truth Social account shortly after his comments on the Pope. But when asked about the image, Donald Trump denied that he was trying to look like Jesus Christ. Instead, he said that it was meant to portray him as a doctor.
Well, it wasn't depiction. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor, making people better.
Meanwhile, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni offered support to Pope Leo after the pontiff was sharply criticized by Donald Trump.
What I said is what I think. Those statements, particularly regarding the pontiff, were unacceptable. I expressed and continue to express my solidarity with Pope Leo. I'll tell you more. Frankly, I would not feel at ease in a society where religious leaders do what political leaders tell them to do. Let's say, not in this part of the world. So that is why I did not agree, and I said it.
Now, the AI-generated image has led to an outcry from religious leaders, including prominent conservative Christians, who are considered among Trump's biggest backers. Amid severe backlash, Donald Trump deleted the image from his Truth Social account on Monday. Meanwhile, American Vice President J.D. Vance has also weighed in on the entire controversy. In an interview with Fox News, Vance appeared to defend Trump's comments, saying that the Vatican should stick to matters of morality.
Brett, again, I don't think that it's particularly newsworthy, but I certainly think that in some cases it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy.
Now, as this row intensifies, Pope Leo has said that he will continue to speak out against the war. Speaking aboard the papal flight to Algiers, the pontiff also said that he has no fear of the Trump administration.
I have no fear of the Trump administration or speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. And I am called to know what the church is called to do.
The escalating feud has prompted criticism from Catholics, many of whom see Donald Trump's comments as crossing a red line.
I'm kind of disappointed of how he reciprocated that position to our God, but that's his opinion, and I will pray for him. That's all I can say.
Last year, after the death of Pope Francis, Donald Trump had posted a photograph of himself as the Pope, and he had joked that he would like to be the next Pope. The image had drawn some backlash, even as the White House reposted this image. And coming up on Gravitas, millions of people in Sudan are surviving on just one meal a day. The country's food crisis is deepening and is now threatening to spread across the region. We're getting you more details. And Colombia is preparing to cull dozens of what they call cocaine hippos. What is the history of these hippos and how are they linked to the notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar? We're getting you all of this in just a bit. Amid escalating tensions with China over Taiwan, Japan is now moving toward a historic shift, one that could see Tokyo possess a conventional military for the first time in nearly 80 years, the first since World War II. Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party is pushing to amend the country's pacifist constitution, and at the center of this lies Article 9, a clause written in 1947 under the US occupation after World War II. It renounces war and clearly states that Japan will not maintain land, sea, or air forces with war potential in theory. That means Japan does not have an army. Instead, in reality, Japan operates self-defense forces, officially described as a strictly defensive, civilian-controlled organization, not really a traditional military. Despite being one of the most advanced military forces in the world, these self-defense forces have operated under tight constitutional limits since World War II, restricted to defensive operations, disaster response, and limited international peacekeeping. Now, the Japan Prime Minister, Sanai Takaichi, is calling for concrete proposals to revise the constitution, not to scrap Article 9, but to formally recognize and legitimize the self-defense forces. A move that comes in the backdrop of growing regional tensions with China. Amending the Japanese constitution requires a two-thirds majority in both houses of the country's parliament following a national referendum. Even as Japan contemplates changes to its constitution, it is fortifying remote islands for potential war over Taiwan. On the Iwoto Island, which is better known as Iwo Jima, which witnessed one of the World War II's bloodiest battles, Tokyo is considering stationing fighter jets permanently on this island. A move that would allow Japan to respond within minutes to any foreign military activity in the region. Japan also plans to deploy medium-range surface-to-air missile systems on the Yonaguni Island, located only 110 kilometers from Taiwan by March 2031, a move that is expected to extend Japan's air defense reach by around 50 kilometers. Japan is reportedly planning to deploy advanced anti-ship missiles as well on the Minamitorishia, which is the country's easternmost island. In addition, Japan is also reportedly planning to deploy a launcher, surveillance drones and radar systems on the island as early as June this year. Tensions continue to rise in the South China Sea. Philippines has accused China of a dangerous new tactic, which it claims could threaten both marine life and regional stability. Manila says that it has found traces of cyanide on Chinese fishing vessels that are operating near the disputed Second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands. According to the Philippine authorities, laboratory tests confirmed the presence of a toxic substance in bottles seized by the Navy last year. Officials warn that the use of cyanide could devastate fish populations in the area, potentially cutting off a key food source for Filipino troops that are stationed on a deliberately grounded warship since 1999. It reinforces the country's territorial claims. They also caution that damage to the reef could weaken the structure supporting the vessel itself. The Philippines has described this as a deliberate act of sabotage. China, however, has flatly denied these allegations. Beijing, meanwhile, has dismissed the claims as fabricated, accusing the Philippines of harassing Chinese fishermen and staging what it calls a stunt, a claim rejected by Philippines a short while back.
China remains unwavering in its resolve to safeguard territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests, and will continue to take resolute countermeasures against any rights violation and provocations.
Now, this latest dispute adds to a series of confrontations in the region. Manila has previously accused Chinese forces of blocking resupply missions and engaging in aggressive actions, including a violent incident in June 2024, which had left a Filipino sailor seriously injured. More recently, Filipino fishermen reported being targeted with Chinese water cannons near another contested shoal. China, remember, maintains its claims over most of the South China Sea despite an international tribunal ruling back in 2016, which had found those claims legally invalid. Now, with over $3 trillion in global trade passing through these waters annually, the stakes remain extremely high and the situation increasingly volatile. All right, shifting our focus now. If you are a Meta employee and cannot get hold of the boss, do not worry. An AI version of its CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, will soon answer all of your queries. As per reports, Meta is working on Zuckerberg's AI version. This AI clone is being trained on his mannerisms and tone, as well as his public statements and thoughts on company's strategy. This endeavor is reportedly aimed at making employees feel more connected to the Meta chief. Now, how will it help Meta? It will reportedly serve as an internal AI agent to support Mark Zuckerberg in decision-making and streamline access to information. This AI clone will provide Zuckerberg insights and data in real time. Obviously, this has raised fresh questions about whether artificial intelligence could eventually replace leadership-level roles as well. But this is not an aberration. The tech giant has been heavily investing in AI infrastructure inside Meta. Employees are already using AI-powered tools such as Second Brain to analyze documents and communicate across teams. However, thousands of jobs might be at risk. Reports suggest that Meta is planning sweeping layoffs that could impact at least 20% of the company as it banks on AI for greater efficiency. This raises another key question. While AI can improve efficiency, can it be a replacement for human insights to ensure ethical decision-making? This assumes significance as Meta lost a key lawsuit last month. A U.S. court, remember, had found Meta and Google of being negligent in designing addictive products, which resulted in a 19-year-old woman slipping into depression and developing suicidal thoughts. According to the judges, both tech companies failed to provide adequate warnings about potential danger of their products. As a result, Meta and Google were asked to pay the petitioner $4.2 and $1.8 million respectively. All right, moving on to a case in France which turns our attention to corporate accountability and war crimes. A French court delivered a landmark verdict against Lafarge over terror financing in the war-torn Syria. It found that the cement company was guilty of financing terror groups through its operations in Syria during the height of its civil war. The court examined years of evidence which details how Lafarge maintained operations at its Jalabia cement plant in northern Syria between 2013 and 14. The region was controlled by extremist factions, including the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant and al-Nusra fronts. During this period, prosecutors argued that the company paid around $6.5 million to armed groups. The money was paid in order to secure safe passage for employees and supplies, purchase raw materials from territories under the militant control, and keep the factory running despite international sanctions. The court ruled that these payments were deliberate, they were made purely for economic gains, and were in direct violation of European sanctions. Lafarge was fined $1.32 million. Additional assets worth $35 million were also confiscated. The company then faced penalties for breaching international sanctions as well. Lafarge reportedly invested around $800 million into a factory in Syria. These investments were made just a year before the civil war began in Syria. Now, while most multinationals had pulled out of Syria by 2012, Lafarge evacuated only its expatriate employees and left its Syrian workforce in place. The verdict did not stop at corporate liability. 8 former employees, including its senior executives, were found guilty of financing terrorism. Bruno Lafont, who's the company's former CEO, has been sentenced to 6 years in prison for his role in approving or overseeing the payments. Christian Herold received a 5-year sentence. Other employees were handed sentences ranging from 1 to 7 years, along with fines. The court made it clear that senior leadership could not claim ignorance because the decisions were made at the highest levels to prioritize business continuity over legal and ethical obligations.
C'est un avertissement monumental.
This is a monumental warning to the entire community of multinational corporations that profit from armed conflicts around the world. That's why it's such a significant warning, and we hope there won't be so much business as usual after this decision.
Extrême et qu'on espère qu'il y aura pas autant de business as usual.
Now, the ruling is only one part of a much larger legal saga. Investigations into Lafarge began in 2017. The company had already faced serious allegations beyond terror financing as well. In 2022, a French court confirmed charges linking the company to complicity in crimes against humanity. The charges were based on claims that its payments indirectly supported groups that are responsible for mass killings, torture, and enslavement. Although Lafarge has contested these allegations, this case against the cement company remains ongoing in France. In the US, meanwhile, the company admitted that its Syrian subsidiary paid millions to extremist groups and agreed to a massive $778 million in fines, making it one of the largest penalties of its kind. And it marks the first time when a whole company was tried for financing terrorism in France. Sudan is facing a fast worsening humanitarian disaster, with millions of people now surviving on just one meal a day as a brutal war continues to devastate the country. A new report by a coalition of aid organizations warns that the food crisis is deepening at an alarming rate in the country and risks spreading even further. Meanwhile, more than 700 people have been killed in drone strikes since January this year. The conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF, is now entering its 4th year. It has collapsed food systems, destroyed markets, and forced millions from their homes. According to the UN aid chief, nearly 700 civilians have been killed in drone strikes since January alone. A coalition including Action Against Hunger Care International, IRC, Mercy Corps, and the Norwegian Refugee Council reports that the entire communities in worst affected regions are now eating only once a day and sometimes not at all. In areas such as North Darfur and South Kordofan, families are surviving on whatever they can find, with some resorting to eating leaves and animal feed just to stay alive. Community kitchens that once provided basic relief are now struggling to operate as food supplies dwindle and humanitarian access remains severely restricted. The scale of this crisis is staggering. More than 12 million people have been displaced, while over 33 million now require humanitarian assistance. The United Nations says more than 40,000 people have been killed since the beginning of the war, although aid groups warn that the true death toll could be far higher. According to the 2026 Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan, 61.7% of the Sudanese population is facing acute food insecurity. The army-aligned Sudanese government denies the existence of any famine, while the RSF denies responsibility for such conditions in areas under its control. From farmland to markets, The systemic collapse of Sudan's food economy is accelerated by violence, blockades, and the use of starvation as a weapon of war. Famine conditions have already been confirmed in parts of the country, with malnutrition levels breaching the threshold. Behind the statistics is a deep human cost. Women and girls are particularly vulnerable, facing increased risks of violence when searching for food or water. Female-headed households are 3 times more likely to experience severe food shortages. Moving on, deep beneath the tranquil beauty of America's first national park, a giant is stirring. New seismic imaging has now peeled back the layers of the earth to reveal a magma chamber which is far more active than previously understood. We explore these latest scientific findings behind the Yellowstone supervolcano and what these closer than expected heat sources actually mean for our future.
It looks calm on the surface, forests, rivers, geysers rising. A landscape that feels stable, predictable, even peaceful. But deep below, the story is more complex. Scientists have long known that Yellowstone sits above a vast volcanic system. Not a single volcano, but a network. Layers of molten rock, heat and pressure interacting over time. Now, new research by Chinese scientists published in the Science Journal suggests something important. The magma source beneath Yellowstone may be closer to the surface than previously believed. Not erupting, not building towards an immediate event for decades, scientists thought a deep mantle plume, essentially a vertical column of superheated rock rising from thousands of kilometers inside the Earth, was the main engine powering the supervolcano. The new research tells a different story entirely. Rather than a single upward blast of heat, the system appears to be a tangled web of underground magma highways that distribute heat across the park, powering its geysers and hot springs. The rigid outer layer of Earth that extends roughly 100 kilometers underground. As this material is stretched by the mantle flowing underneath, pressure drops sharply and causes the rock to melt, generating magma. The new findings do not point to danger. They refine understanding. They help scientists map how heat and material move beneath the surface, how the system breathes over time. A major eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano would cause catastrophic regional destruction and severe global climate consequences. It would blanket most of the US in ash, killing crops, halting travel, and causing a volcanic winter. Yellowstone's last major eruption was approximately 630,000 years ago, and while it is not overdue for another one soon, scientists are keeping a close watch. This new model helps scientists improve predictions about volcanic activity.
Shifting focus now, India's eastern state of Bihar is undergoing a major political change. Its longest-serving chief minister is passing the baton after 20 years in power. Nitish Kumar will be succeeded by Bharatiya Janata Party's Samrat Chaudhary, making him the first ever BJP chief minister of Bihar. Earlier in the day, the BJP elected Samrat Chaudhary as their legislative party leader, paving way for him to become the state's next chief minister. Samrat Chaudhary has already been serving as Bihar's deputy chief minister. The former Bihar chief minister, Nitish Kumar, congratulated him at the NDA legislature party meeting. Nitish Kumar also pledged his support for the upcoming government. His party, JDU, and the BJP have been part of the NDA in Bihar. After the announcement, Samrat Chaudhary thanked the top leadership of the National Democratic Alliance.
Nitish Kumar has taught a lot of things: how to run government, how to establish good governance, and what is good for Bihar's democracy. I want to assure everyone that we will work for Bihar's development and prosperity.
Bihar's leader of opposition, Tejasvi Yadav, meanwhile criticized the move. He said that Samrat Chaudhary does not have the people's mandate and that the people of Bihar have no hope from him.
This chief minister is not chosen by the people of Bihar. People of Bihar have no hope from these people. Samrat Chaudhary failed to control crime during his tenure as Home Minister of Bihar.
India is facing a silent but rapidly growing health crisis. Cases of the fatty liver disease are rising sharply across the country, especially in younger individuals. And experts say the biggest drivers are not alcohol, but diabetes, obesity, and our modern lifestyle. Doctors are warning of this troubling trend. Younger individuals are increasingly being diagnosed with fatty liver, reflecting a shift driven by sedentary habits, processed diets, and rising stress levels. The key risk factors remain high blood sugar, excess body weight, and lack of physical activity. Fatty liver, remember, is a condition where excess fat builds up in liver cells. It can cause inflammation and permanent scarring. Initial symptoms include fatigue, mild discomfort, or even pain in the upper right abdomen and unexplained weight loss. Now, what makes this disease particularly dangerous is that these symptoms often show much later, and many people don't even realize that they have it until it progresses into serious complications like liver damage, cirrhosis, or even cancer. But not all is lost yet. There is a silver lining. Experts say that fatty liver disease is reversible if caught early. Lifestyle changes like regular exercise, weight loss, and better diet control can all significantly improve liver health. Medically known as metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, the prevalence of this condition in India has surged by nearly 23% since 1990, as per a latest Lancet study. Globally, the numbers are even more alarming, with cases jumping over 140% in the same period. With India already battling rising lifestyle diseases like diabetes, fatty liver could be the next major public health challenge, unless urgent steps are taken. They were the strangest legacy of the world's most notorious drug lord. Hippos imported from Africa to a Colombian jungle kingdom. Decades later, that number has exploded into a crisis, and now Colombia has made a brutal decision. Dozens of hippos roaming freely through a region will be killed.
In the jungles of central Colombia, something enormous is moving through the rivers. Not a cartel, not a weapon, something far more unexpected and far harder to stop. Colombia is the only country outside of Africa with a wild hippopotamus population. And this week, the government has decided it can no longer ignore what Pablo Escobar started. These hippos are the descendants of the four brought into the country in the 1980s by Escobar. He had built a private zoo at Hacienda Napoles, a gigantic ranch in the Magdalena River Valley. This served as his rural base of operations. Escobar was killed in 1993, but the hippos stayed, and they bred. By 2022, it was estimated that around 170 hippos were roaming freely in the country, and they have since spread further. Colombia has declared them an invasive species, and experts have said that sterilization alone is not enough to control the growth of the animals. So now, authorities have decided to cull them.
Without that action, it is impossible to control the population, and as we already saw in the estimates, it would mean that by 2030, we will have at least 500 hippos affecting our ecosystems and impacting our native species, such as the manatee and the river turtle. It is out of responsibility toward our ecosystems that we must take these actions.
Not everyone agrees with the decision. Animal rights activists condemn the plan as cruel, arguing that these animals are victims of government negligence, not threats deserving death. Pablo Escobar built an empire on chaos, and even his animals can't escape that inheritance. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Moving on, India marked the festival of Baisakhi, a day which holds significance across religious communities and for the country's farmers. Sikh devotees visit gurudwaras to mark the Khalsa Day, which is the foundational event for the religion. For many Hindu devotees, Baisakhi marks the solar new year, as many pray in Haridwar to usher new beginnings. For farmers, meanwhile, it marks the harvest of the Rabi crop. Across India, it was a day of colorful processions, celebrations and prayers. Take a look. And on that wonderful note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Good night. Bye-bye.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
5 states, 1 powerful voice. From Tamil Nadu to West Bengal. From Kerala to Assam. Every vote shapes the future. Get the election pulse only on WION.
In this rapidly changing world, is your health keeping pace? Best practices and breakthroughs busting the hype with real insights. The timeless power of yoga and ancient healing. Good food, good mood. Small steps, big impact. Your health matters. Only on WION World is One. Because nothing matters more.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
breaking
missiles
news.
And raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.